Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we'll Masechtas Gittin Daf Chaf Beis. We're going to begin on Chaf Beis and with Aleph, the second line from the top. So we were learning the dinim of writing a get on a leaf and writing it on a perforated pot. So now the Gemara continues to discuss this regarding other dinim of pots. Atzitz shel echad. So let's say the flower pot belonged to one person, and uzeroyim shel acher, and the seeds belong to a second person. So the two parties, even though the seeds were inside the pot, so the question is, since they have different ownership, what if you sell one of them to the other? So the Gemara says like this: Machar bal atzitz lobal zerayim. Let's say the owner of the flower pot sells his pot to the one who owns the seeds. So kivan shemashach kana. As soon as Mashicha is done, so we say that he is kind of the otzitz. He's kind of the flower pot. And the reason is because a flower pot in itself is metaltalin. And therefore, that's how you're kind of metaltalin. However, machar Bal Zerayim L'Bal Otzitz, if the one who has the seeds is selling them to the Bal Otzitz, so the seeds are considered to be like connected to the ground. Therefore, Lo Kana Ad Sheyachzik B'Zrayim. You actually have to make some type of a chazaka, which is one of the ways of acquiring karka. Says Rashi, Otzitz Havitolish. The flower pot is detached. Umeknim b'mashicha, so you can be kind of the otzitz through mashicha. Zeroyim havi mechubarin, but the zeroyim are considered to be like attached to the ground. V'dinu kekarka, nedim b'kesem shtar b'chazaka. That's the reason why it says you can be kind of with chazaka. V'yad shiachzik can go on. How do you do a chazaka with these seeds? For example, the nichesh, weeding, o ider, or hoeing, the havi chazaka. Mice, Kamari, we're not talking about where money was exchanged. Diyayiv Zuze Mikdim Kesef. Because as we know, one of the ways you can be kind of karka is through kesef. So therefore, that's the reason why it says chazaka, because if it was with kesef, then you wouldn't need a chazaka, you can be kind of through kesef. Back in the Gemara. Let's say you have the seeds in the pot and the pot itself. They're both owned by the same person. And he wants to sell both of them, which again, one has the din of like karka, one has the din of metaltalin, to one person. So hisik b'zrayim, if he makes a chazaka on the seeds, which has a din of karka, then kan otzitz. Agav, it's going to be kind of the metaltalin, which is the pot. Mazuhi Shishnina, so what you learn in Masechtas Kedushin, Nechasim Shein Machrayas Metaltal, and Niklim Nechasim Shesham Machrayas, Bechesav Shtar Chazaka. That as long as you did a kinyan on the karka, you can also be kind of the metaltalin as well. And here, certainly because the metaltalin are connected to the karka, they're right next to each other. And the Gemara over there even says, the debates whether it needs siburin, the metaltalin needs to be mamish at the same location as the karka, or not necessary. Okay. Hichzik ba'otzitz, but let's say you made a chazaka on the otzitz, which we said is metaltalin, then you're not kind of the otzitz either. Af otzitz l'kana ad sheyachzik b'zrayim, because again, you can't do a kinyan chazaka, which is for karka, on something which has a din of metaltalin. Says Rashi, Av otzitz l'kana the metaltalin l'ud mikni b'chazaka. Back in the Gemara, nikvu b'aretz. Let's say you have a tree, or this pot, in which the hole is actually in Eretz Yisrael. However, v'noifa b'chatzorets, the branches are bending, and therefore basically the entirety of the tree is outside of Eretz Yisrael. So it's literally right on the border, but the pot is getting its nutrients from the ground of Eretz Yisrael, but for whatever reason the tree is bent, so that basically the entirety of a tree is in Chutz La'aretz. So by Omer Basir Nikvar, Nakvar Azlina, we go Basir the whole, and therefore it has the din of Eretz Yisrael. And Rashi says, Shahayim munach al gvul. It's like right on the border. So why do we go after the hole? Says Rashi, Shimasham hu yoinik v'chai b'maiser, because it's getting its nutrients. It doesn't matter that it's leaning into chutzlaretz. The reality is it's getting all its nutrients from the earth from Eretz Yisrael. So it'll be chai b'maiser. Rabbi Omer basar naifo azlin. Then we go basar the branches, and therefore you're going to be pater from maiser min Torah, which is the din of chutzlaretz. The Gemara says, well, it depends. Bid ashrush, if the roots came out of the pot toward the land of Eretz Yisrael, calling lo pligi, everyone's going to say that it has the din that of Eretz Yisrael, because there's actual roots going out. There's mechuber mamish into the land. Ki pligi b'deloy ashrush. Their whole machlokus is if there are no roots that are coming out of the pot. Fine. Over the ashrush lo pligi, you tell me if there's roots, everyone holds it has the din of Eretz Yisrael, but we learned shtei ginois. You have these two gardens, zu al gav zu, literally one on top of the other. Rashi says v'zu eitzel zu, means they're next to each other. V'karkis ha'achas gavoa mechaverta. It just means that the earth on one of them is a little bit higher than the other. So v'yark b'nei time, and you have vegetables in between these two gardens. Rameir Omer shel elyon, Rabbi Yehuda Omer shel tachton. So the question whether it's connected to the top or to the bottom. Says Rashi, Hu nishrish b'karkai shel elyon. It's rooted to the earth above. V'nofa ba'aviroi, and its branches are in the airspace of the tachton. So what do we see? There's a machlokus whether or not, even though it's getting nutrients and it's rooted, nonetheless the din still is. Maybe we'll still go basar noifai. So hasim taima. The whole reason why over there that there's a machlokus, as is explained. If let's say the top guy was to take his earth in Kanyark, there's no more vegetables. So maybe Huda ma im yirtza hatachton l'malos ginoso afar in Kanyarak. Also the person who is on the bottom part, he can fill up his garden with earth, and also there'll be no vegetables. So it could just be for practical reasons why this case there's a machlokus. However, when there's no condition or potential like that, so then the din is b'da'ashrish, everyone agrees that it has the din of Eretz Yisrael. So the question still stands. V'kati b'da'ashrish shul plegi, but Tanya, I'll show you that they argue also when it's rooted. Iwan miksasu ba'aretz miksasu b'chutzarts. So you have a tree, which literally is on the border between Eretz Yisrael and chutzarts. So we say tevel v'chuan ma rabin zebazeh dibru Rabbi. Rabbi is of the opinion that the whole thing is entirely mixed up. Says Rashi, Ein locha peri be'iwan hazeh she'en miksasu min aretz shu tevel u'miksasu min chutzarts shehu chuan. It's impossible to be able to say that any of the fruits are not getting nourishment from both lands of Eretz Yisrael and Chutzlarts. Says Rashi, Lafi shehanika misareves, because the nourishment of the earth is mixed in. But nafkamina shein masrin metevel vadai. The point is that even though it's a suffix, you can't take off meiser from tevel, which is tevel vadai. Dahavi minachiv al patur, v'loy mimenu al tevel vadai. Right, you're not allowed to take something which is patur al chiv al patur. So over here, if it's tevel vadai, you would not be able to take, based on this doubt. So that is the opinion of Rabbi. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer hagadol b'chiv chayiv, hagadol b'patur patur. We basically just look almost like a plumb line. So wherever the fruits are, so if they're dangling into chutzlarts, they're chutzlarts. The parts of the tree which are part of Eretz Yisrael are Eretz Yisrael, and that's it. So my love, mixus neifel ba'aretz, mixus neifel b'chutzlarts. Sounds like that's the case, that half of the branches are here and half are there. It says Rashi, v'afal pi shekol shirasha ba'aretz. Even if all the branches, all the roots are already in Eretz Yisrael, Almazlin and bust a knife. We can still go bust the knife, even though it's rooted. So we see maybe they argue there too. Well, mixa shrashin ba'aretz and mixa shrashin b'chutz aretz. Don't tell me that we're talking about that some of the branches are in Eretz Yisrael. It means that some of the roots are in Eretz Yisrael, some are in Chutz Aretz, and that's why there's a problem. So my time to will the masik sunma, because there's a rock that separates the roots. So therefore what? It says Rashi, which is a selam mavdil be'emsa hashrashim masikin ad hegazen, and it separates it all the way to the trunk. And therefore, says Rashi, Hilchel Harab Shimon lo yanki mehadadi. They're not really getting nutrients from one another because the rock kind of like splits it. So therefore, the roots are here, the roots are there. So therefore, you would say that if it's the roots from Chutz La'aretz, and then the trees in Chutz La'aretz, that part is Chutz La'aretz. So that's the case. So my time to Rabbi, the Hadri Arvi, because afterwards they get mixed in afterwards. Says Rashi, Sha'etz min hagaza ulmal sholim, because everything else above is not separated. So Mamaikim Efli Mar Sabar Avira Mevalvel Mar Sabar Hayluchudi Koi Bahayluchudi Koi. So one says that the air like mixes it up. Says Rashi, Alpha Bishikol Ma Sheish Min Ashrashim Karka Havi Muvdal, even everything is separated. Hayo Kishyatzil Avir. They still can get nutrients from one another. And one says, no, this one's separate, this one's separate. You see this big rock that's separating the two, the part of the tree. There's this big rock right in between. So therefore, that rock basically separates any of the potential nourishment from Eretz Yisrael or the nourishment from Chutz La'aretz, from the roots that are going on the opposite sides. Okay. Question 4. So again, basically the idea behind this is the maskanas. We're going to see question 4. Otzitz shenakvu ba'aretz. If you have a hole in a flower pot, and the pot is in Eretz Yisrael, but noifu b'chutz la'aretz, but all the branches are in Chutz La'aretz, him chayav b'maiser. So we said in the event that there's roots, im hishrish ba'aretz chutz l'nekev, the roots go out of the hole, then definitely you're chayav b'maiser. Well, hishrish is where there is a machlokas. Okay. Good. Bye. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer v'chu. So now let's go back to the Mishnah that we had on the previous Almud. So he said that, again, we talked about writing on something which is mechubel karka, which is not allowed to do, and the question. Okay, then we get to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, Ein kaisin lual hanar hamachlik. You cannot write a get on paper in which it was already something erased. So it obviously causes that there's an inferior quality of the paper, which is also diphthera, another type of parchment of sorts, that even that when it is erased, it's not recognizable that things were erased. So he says because the issue of forgery. But for some reason, the Chachamim say that this is acceptable. So it says the Gemara. There are 3 different types of hides that have different levels of treatment. One is called matzah, chifa, and then the third one is the difter. So matzah kamash ma'oi. Matzah, we know, is very simple, only has flour and water. It's very, very basic. Basically, nothing is done for matzah. So too when it comes to this parchment. It means the lo maliach, lo kamiach, lo ofetz. Nothing was done with this. It wasn't salted. They didn't put any processing with flour, and also no gallnut juice. So my hilchasa, for what halacha do we need to know this regarding these different measurements? L'hoitza Shabbos, regarding carrying on Shabbos. V'kamashiro, ke'tani Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, kedei latzur mishkol katana, enough to be able to have as a mishkol katana, the small weight. V'kama Omer Abaya, ki rivad de pumadisa, a fourth of a fourth in pumadisa. Okay. So it says Rashi, mishkol katan shulhen hoy. It's like the smallest measurement that they have. So these types of parchment that's the measure. Says Rashi, Mishkoiles shel oiferes asui liospoi cheses umachafen oisab or shotehei nishayfes poi cheses. Again, this was the this hide, which is totally not processed. So again, the Indian Shabbos, we should know this year for Hotzah in that regard. Fine. So that is the first. And then you have Chifa, which is the Mliach lo Kamiach lo Ofitz. You at least applied salt, but you didn't do the flour and no gall nuts. Okay. So it's like somewhere in the middle. It was partially fixed. Chifa, says Rashi, Masukin Kstas. Okay. Since L'may Hilchasa lo Hotzah Shabbos. Again, carrying it out on Shabbos. The Kamashir, what's the measure for that? Kiditnan. Or when it comes to this hide, Kidil Lasos Kameya. It's enough to make an amulet. So, because it was partially prepared, so it's at least enough to you can make an amulet with it. Okay. Diphthera, the maliach v'kamiach lo-ofetz. Diphthera is another step. It was salted with flour, but no gall nuts. L'may hilchas lo hotzah Shabbos v'kamishiru k'dei lichta v'lavas a get. So basically, the whole purpose of this, Rashi says, is Kurabana the Machshri. So we see that even this level of get is acceptable. Umiyu, says Rashi, Klaf Gomer de Meliach Ukamiach V'Afitz Lo Shmei Or. When we're talking about something which is completely processed, why don't we mention that? That's not called or. Mishum Hachi Lo Mani B'Hadayu. That's why it's not included in these categories. As brought down in Masechet Shabbos, Klaf when it comes to cloth, it's the carrying it on Shabbos is enough to be able to write a paragraph to fill in. Of a diphthera, inu kosher to fill in. But diphthera, which is what we brought this down, is not kosher to fill in. Hilchach shiuru get. And therefore, we say it can be used as a get. Okay. Fine. Cannot be used as for tefillin, but it can be used for a get. Okay, because it was not. The gall nut juice was not put on it. Okay. Chachamim machshim. So man chachamim. So who are the chachamim? So the Gemara says this is machachamim. Amar Rabbi Elazar. He says, as we continue Chaf Beis Amud Beis, Rabbi Elazar make sure I got this down. Rabbi Elazar said it was Rabbi Elazar. Okay. Sounds like I say it was me. Who's Rebbe Elazar? It says the Gemara, the Amr Edim Asira Karti. It says Rashi, the Amr Chasimas Aget Edim Edatayra. The whole notion of the concern about the signatures of the get is not a concern to begin with. It says Rashi, V'hilkach, therefore, Leichashinan Dilma Mizayufa. We're not concerned of forgery. Ta Amran Srichel Mikre, it has to be read, V'havi Be Tana Inhu Yadeh. And therefore, the people who hear it are going to hear everything that's on this get, and they're going to remember what's on this get. And then afterwards, if it gets erased, it's not a problem, because they're going to know if it's rewritten and those conditions are not there. They'll be able to say, hey, I remember those conditions were there. Where are they? Then they would know it was forged. So the fact that he holds Edi Masira Karti, and that it needs to be read in front of them, the entirety of the get, the Edom are going to know those people who gave it over all these conditions, if there are any. And that's the reason why this type of parchment is okay. We're not concerned of forgery. V'yam Rebbe Elazar, lo hiksher Rebbe Elazar, and Rebbe Elazar says that Rebbe Elazar is not machshir el altar. Only right away. It says Rashi, Shaviyasul Basin, B'yam Shnimsula, that is brought to the Basin the day it was given over to her. Lahodia shehi gerusha, to let them know she's divorced. V'yatiruha linaseh, which will then allow her to get remarried, because as Rashi says, the kivanda inna havi, since it happened right now, everything was the same day. The Edom are going to remember because it was on the same day. They're going to know what was on that get. So that's only if it was an altar. However, says the Gemara, so if it's more than, let's say, 10 days go by, so these guys may forget, the Edom may not remember. The Edom Asira may have forgotten if there were conditions within 10 days from the time she received the get. Fine. Even if it was 10 days later. If there was actually conditions on the get, which typically are not, it's just a regular get, and all of a sudden there's like all these strange conditions that I mentioned. So even 10 days go by, midkar dekire. These guys are going to remember, and there's still no issue of potential forgery. The only time he said this is allowed with this type of parchment is only when it comes to a get. Why? Says Rashi, because typically you go to the Beis Din, then she gets divorced, and then she can get remarried right away. V'shuv eno sricha get. Once she's mutter, you don't need the get anymore. Kivan shehutra b'Beis Din yesh tikaron v'kol adavar. So since the Beis Din will make her free to marry someone else, people are going to know about it. Over shar shtaros lo. When it comes to other shtaros, that people hold on to them for a long period of time, says Rashi, Adzman Aruch, the Ishko Edi Masira, that's the davar, they're going to forget everything. And they're going to rely on the Edi Chasima, V'hu Mezayif, Ksav Elyon, V'chaisim Edim, Oimin Min Koimo, and there could be forgery. So when it comes to a get, so the whole purpose of a get is just for her to become freed. So therefore, once she typically, again, will normally write a get and the Beis Din will verify it and then she can get remarried, that's the end of the document. However, when it comes to shar shtaros, they're going to hold on to it. Let's say there was a loan or something like that. People are holding on to these documents for a very long period of time. So if it's a very long period of time, those Edi Masir are not going to remember what was actually written there, any conditions, and potentially could have been erased. How do we see that documents typically were for long periods of time? Because in Yomi it says, put it into earthenware vessel, so it shall last a long time. It says Rashi, Alma, be'inan davar haruy lalmoid, liskayim. You need kli cheres, which will cause these documents to last a long time. When it comes to the selling of properties, if you lose your property because you're going to Golas to get it back. Anyway, the point is that he's coming to tell you that when it comes to these types of documents, they're held on for a long period of time. So those Edi Masir are not going to remember if there was any changes or what was on it. The din is that even when it comes to shtaros, these paper documents, this type of material is okay, or still not a concern of forgery. I'm just giving you advice. But it doesn't. Yeah, you should try to store it in good earthenware vessels. But it's not necessarily because we're more of a concern that it may get forged because the Edi Masir are not going to remember it. Okay, we will stop there. Let's see question 5. Elu shtaros aksuvim al hadiftera nechel b'gemara im ksherim heim alibed or belezer be'Edi Masir karti. So either if a get was given to her after 10 days, right? The get shehevi also ishul a Beis Din was given over to the Beis Din after 10 days. The Edi Masir may not remember what exactly was on it. The other machlokes is by shar shtaros she'enim l'kinyan el oraya. So the whole purpose is not for a kinyan to acquire something, but for some type of a proof. So then it becomes potentially problematic. Okay. Let's see what I wrote over here. Question TA 20. I got this one wrong too. Chachamim machshirim b'nayir mochok. It's erased. Madu machshirim. Bar yochel is dayif. It can be forged. So the answer is because he holds like Rabbi Lezer that Edi Masir karti. Umandi amad mishar shtaris moedim chachamim the apostle. How do they know it's possible? Umas svar b'zeh. Again, we just did this. So the Chamim will say it's Rabbi Lezer that holds Edi Masir karti. This is TA 20. It's not such a hard question. I'm not sure why I got this wrong, but so it is. And then with shar shtaris possible ksibuman yamim rabim the chashina because a long time shema yoitziu Ugavainu ad zman orach. You have to wait for a long time to collect. Yishlei de Masira Sadavar, and they're going to forget this whole matter. Okay, that's TH20, which I got wrong, unfortunately. And TB21, I think, similar question I got really wrong. Kosav get al davar shiachal is dayif, mahadin mandua. And I wrote, Ze pasal el im kosav al golnuts. It's totally wrong. So, first of all, you can say cleanly it's definitely a machlokas in our Mishnah. But more than that, you would say it's, when it comes to a get, it could be whether you hold madua, right? If you hold like Rabbi Eliezer, that Edi Masira Karti, so then in that situation, the din is that you could use it. You could use such material. If you hold a Chasima Karti, then not, because we're concerned it's forged. And possibly this question is also going further and saying that maybe there's a chiluk even by a get, what Rebbe Lezer made not makshir in certain circumstances. It was ad achar asar yomim, because there maybe the people who are the witnesses may forget. Adka.